In today's episode, the Ford Scorpio for 1998. Hello and welcome to Quarterlight, your car brochure channel, where we look at car brochures from around the world in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 1990s, although we go beyond those years again. So basically, car brochures from around the world here on YouTube. Today, of course, no different. We're going to look at the Ford Scorpio, like I mentioned at the top of the show. In fact, this has been a bit of a series for a 1998 full range brochure from Ford. Really just little snippets. These are shorter episodes, around about the 10-minute mark in this particular brochure, but it gives you an idea what the range was like in 1998. 1998, of course, last year for the Scorpio, so there were some subtle changes to this very controversial styled vehicle. Anyway, if all this might interest you, please do watch a bit of the show. Consider subscribing, it is all absolutely free. Anyway, let's turn to the brochure. So here is the brochure we're looking at. Vast range of cars featured in this brochure, and it's actually a big brochure, but there isn't much information on each car because there are so many cars in the Ford range at this time, and rather unusually they've even included the commercial models in the range as well. There's also to note there is a separate page for the estates or the wagons. That'll be next week's show, so we won't be covering the Scorpio estate in this one. It will be covered as a general estate episode next week. Anyway, can we see the Scorpio from this image? There it is. Let's maybe just zoom in a little bit on that. So there she is, in a segment that was always very popular in the UK. The Granada was always a very popular name in the UK. In fact, the previous model to this in the UK was still called Granada, where everywhere in Europe was actually calling that the Scorpio. So everyone in Europe would know this as the Mark II Scorpio. In the UK, this was the first time we've got that Scorpio badge on an entire range of cars, rather than what we used it for as a higher spec level. So I guess in the UK it was controversial for a couple of reasons really. Yes, we've dropped the Granada name, we've got the Scorpio name exclusively now, and more controversially, of course, was the styling, particularly that front end. It was, I would say I love it or hate it styling really, but I think it was more either you hated it or you thought it was okay. I think I was more on the I'm not sure when it first came out, and then all the press started hating it, and it's hard not to hate it when everyone, every time you switch the TV on, Top Gear, whatever, they're all hating the styling, which is hard not to go on that bandwagon. But I don't think I ever hated the styling. In fact, today I probably got used to the styling somewhat, but of course I always preferred the styling of the squarer Granada. I think the other issue was the front and the back headlight styling didn't seem to match somehow. We've got this sort of rounded front end and then a bit of a squared off rear, but maybe we'll look at that a bit later on. Anyway, let's turn to the actual page for Scorpio. So when we turn to the page itself, rather smartly they show a side shot rather than a full-on front shot. Side shot, you can almost get your head around the styling. It's really that front-on shot that was difficult to get used to. The model shown here is going to be a Ghia X, so there would have been three models: the Ghia X and the Ultima, with all the leather of course. But overall, once you're inside the car, I thought they always had lovely interiors actually. But anyway, I am waffling too much on there, so let's read the text. There isn't a great deal of it. See what the standard features are, have a glance of those spec levels, and then we'll work our way around these images. So the text tells us, behind the wheel of Scorpio you'll find time for quiet reflection, with plenty to contemplate. What makes the Scorpio range especially satisfying is a selection of very thoughtful details. So you have more time for quality thinking, to concentrate on the road ahead and the sheer driving pleasure. An unusual little bit of a paragraph, almost like it's telling you it's all boring, you've got time to think of other things. I don't know. An unusual way to start describing a executive car, I guess. But standard features, we got a leather trimmed seats. Leather trimmed seats are standard, nice. Air conditioning, a CD player, driver's front passengers and side airbags, electronically controlled anti-lock brakes with traction control on the 24 valve and Ultima petrol models, safeguard engine immobiliser. We also get a standard, a remote control, a central double locking, automatic global operation of front and rear windows and sunroof via key door lock, which again is a lot for every model, but there wasn't really a budget model in this range at this time. We also get a heated windscreen, quick clear with heated washer jets on petrol models, electrically operated and heated door mirrors, high mounted rear brake lights, 3 rear inertia real 3-point seat belts, electrically operated front and rear windows, metallic paint at no extra cost, and a multi-function fuel computer on the petrol model. So really, unless you wanted like full leather or something, there was really not much point going on the range because every one was very well high spec. But having said that, they tried to make these a little bit more premium, so they weren't any sort of like your budget models, LGL, etc. We moved straight in. Your base model was a Ghia. How many base model Fords start with a Ghia? So your base model's got the Ghia badge, then we go one more for a Ghia X, and then the all singing, all dancing Ultima. Both available as either the 4-door saloon, which we're looking at today, or the estate, which we'll look at next week. I guess the thing with the estate, the rather nice thing about the estate in this case, Ford were always very lazy with their estates. They always had the rear ends of the previous model. No change here. We've got the proper Granada rear end on the estate, so that certainly was an advantage with the estate model. The models we're looking at, so the model we're going to look at, the main picture, like we said, is the Ghia X, and then it's showing the interior of the Ultima rather cheekily. We'll start by looking at the interior. A sea of black though, isn't it? This picture really is come and have a look what you could have had, really. Because like I said, the main picture isn't this model. This is your all singing, all dancing Ultima. Never a huge fan of leather seats though, so I wasn't that tempted by this. And never a huge fan of Ford leather seats. This sort of like ruched edges, almost looks a little bit baggy. I never liked them, and that sort of baggy look they've done for years, I was never a huge fan, and I don't think I like all that black. But this classic car, I think black was what you were supposed to be loving. Anyway, we also get a tiny image, which there really doesn't seem to be much point in actually being there, and then we'll get to the main picture now. The lovely Ghia X, sort of the middle of the range model, which was probably the most popular of the three, I believe, although I don't have any figures to support that. Rather nice alloy wheels there. It's a typical so-called executive class picture in a brochure, really, being black, unfortunately. So it does, well, I say it does lose some of the design elements when you get black, but maybe in the case of Scorpio that wasn't a particularly bad thing, particularly as at the end of production, this is 1998, they started darkening things. So I think the rears were a little bit smoked, a little bit darkened, but more important, the fronts were, so a bit of a smoked grille and headlights. And it almost like tried to hide that front styling, which was so controversial. And I think it did help to some degree to just eliminate some of that sort of like frog-eyed look that it had, almost like a bit of a startled look. But at the time, Ford were coming out with all sorts of curvy designs. But they went curvy at the front, but kind of like squared off at the back, which was a little bit bad. A lot of people hated the rear as well. I didn't mind the rear, actually. I didn't mind the styling of that at all. Although I must confess, maybe because I really liked the Granada before it, the Estate would have been the one I would have picked, which had that proper Granada or Mark I Scorpio rear end on it. I think that would have been my pick. But when you buy a car, where do you spend most of the time? Behind the steering wheel. And behind the wheel, it was actually a really nice car. I loved the interior styling. I loved the equipment levels on it. I didn't mind it at all. But of course, it became a bit of a jokey car. And of course, what replaced it? I guess that is the question. What did Ford replace this with? Well, I guess there wasn't really a direct replacement. They kind of like said, well, there's no need for this size of car anymore. People wanted more luxurious badges on this class of car, which may or may not have been the case. But of course, Ford by this time had ownership of Jaguar and Volvo, didn't they? So things like the Jag S-Type, Volvo S80, maybe they were the direct replacements. So Volvo S80 seems to be what really replaced it, kind of like indirectly, because like I said, Ford owned Volvo at the time, so maybe there was a little bit clever about that. They always talk about bringing a Cadillac out to replace it. Not Cadillac, I don't know why I said Cadillac, a Lincoln to replace it, because Ford and Lincoln, but that never really happened. It kind of like almost happened. And did they sell a few? I think they maybe sold a few and then that was it. But I think the Volvo S80 was the real replacement for these cars. But anyway, what do you think? Very controversial car. Very controversial. Probably the most controversial car in this brochure. But it is right at the end. They've darkened the lights. Doesn't look quite as frog-eyed. Did help it to some degree, particularly if you picked a dark colour like black. What do you think about it? Like I say, at the end of production, 1998, I'm sure there would have been some bargains, because there were a lot of people completely put off by that styling. So maybe there were bargains to be had if you could cope with the styling, because I think overall it wasn't actually a bad car. I'm sure now you can probably pick them up for zero if you can actually find any. Or are they becoming collectible? Again, you tell me. I'm a little bit out of touch with the UK market, but we'll do a bit of a conclusion then to this episode. So there we go, 1998 in the Ford Scorpio. Like I said, just in the comments your thoughts, feelings. I think the majority of people really didn't like this design and wouldn't have been said dead in one, but I would have happily driven around in one of these, wafted around in one of these. I think they were particularly nice interiors. I think the interiors would have attracted me overall, but like I said, I probably would have got the estate. But thank you so much for watching today's episode of Quarterlight. Next week, of course, like I said, the estates, and then we'll move on to things like the people carrier, like the Galaxy. Remember those? Anyway, we'll end as we always do by saying, please do consider subscribing. It is all completely free. You never be charged to be a subscriber, so please look into that. It does keep you in touch with the channel. More of the Ford range again next week, like I say, with the estate. But overall, thank you so much for watching today. Please do take care. We'll see you again very soon. All the best and goodbye.